What's up, guys? So after the last couple videos that I posted about finding the car out of Lake Shawnee, it spurred a lot of comments and a lot of people that were interested in the Randy Leach case. Now, for those of you that don't know, there's a ton of different hypotheses out there that what happened to him. Basically, for those of you that don't know, a very quick explanation is, so basically a man went missing after a high school graduation back in, I believe it was 1988, and ever since then the family has not gotten closure. They've never found Randy, they've never found the car. There's a ton of different hypotheses of what happened to him, and there's a lot of people that have been hoping that some of the cars that have been pulled from northeast Kansas lakes in the past 30 years have been him to give the family some closure. Um, Unfortunately, they still have not found the car. So what I kind of started thinking was, okay, how do we approach this from a different perspective? How do you really how do I combine the electronics that I use every day for bass fishing and apply them to hunting for a missing person and to help resolve a case? So I started thinking of it not necessarily from a bass fishing electronics standpoint, but a bass fishing tournament strategy standpoint. So let me back up. When I'm preparing for a bass tournament, I'm looking at Google Earth and basically mapping of the lake in order to determine high percentage areas. These areas are locations that are more apt to hold the fish I'm looking for than the rest of the lake. So basically, I go to the lake and it's massive. And by the time, or I start with a lake and it's massive. And by the time I go to the lake, I'm narrowing it down to a smaller portion so that I can be a lot more efficient in trying to find my target species or the target size of fish, whatever. So basically, we're taking a bigger portion of the lake and condensing it down to a smaller, more manageable section. And my thought was, okay, if we apply this to looking for a car instead of fish, we can really attack it from the same strategy in that we're looking for a few things in particular. So bass fishing, we're looking for a channel swing. So basically a channel in a lake, so that's where the old creek channel just flowed throughout the system. So basically it's the highway for the fish throughout a system. So basically it's the road, highway, however you want to look at it, and where it comes and butts up next to a point or a bank, that's considered a high percentage area. It's a place that those fish are more apt to stop traveling along the road. Basically it's a feeding place, it's some place for them to congregate. So my thought was, okay, how do we relate this to a car and where an accident could potentially occur? So again, we go back to Google Earth and just Google Map, just a map in general, and really looking at these lakes. So there's a couple lakes in particular that I think that are within the Linwood area that we could potentially go out and scan. So the lakes that I'm thinking are Clinton Lake, Perry Lake, Leavenworth State Fishing Lake, Douglas State Fishing Lake, and Lone Star Lake. So with those 5 lakes, I think we've got the best opportunity to be able to go out in a boat and graph and look around at these higher probability areas that something could have happened. So basically, what are we looking for? We're looking for locations that potentially have a road butt up right next to the water, where there could potentially maybe be a little bit deeper water nearby. We're looking for a place that doesn't have a lot of obstructions between the road and the water, so it could be a longer stretch in between where the road is and where the lake is. But if there's no trees there, and there were no trees there back in the late 80s, it's a potential area where something could have happened. And how we can kind of determine whether there are trees there and what the roads look like in the 80s is from aerial photos. So like Google Earth, you can go back in time and look at what places look like years in the past. So if we do that and we look at these areas and figure out different locations where an accident could have occurred, maybe the road bends in a campground right up next to the water's edge. Well, that could be a location where an accident could have happened and he could have went off into the water. So if we eliminate the giant lake down into smaller chunks and smaller locations where something like this could have happened, it gives us a higher probability of finding a car and possibly solving this case just based off of us basically taking thousands and thousand acre lakes and condensing them down into, okay, we can basically go through and graph all these locations in a day or two and really eliminate a lot of water and eliminate a lot of different locations where that car could be. So it's a lot higher volume looking, or it's a lot of higher volume looking through productive water. And that it's exactly what I'm looking for while bass fishing and exactly what I'm looking for in a bass tournament. So I think this is kind of a different perspective that people may not have looked at heavily in the past and used modern electronics in order to check these locations. So let's go to Google Earth and kind of see what I'm talking about. All right, this is the Leavenworth State Lake. It's right by Tonganoxie, which is fairly close to Linwood. If you've ever been in this area, you know that Tonganoxie is not that far away from Linwood and the hometown of Randy Leach. So if we zoom in here and go over to the Leavenworth State Lake, already based off of looking at this from a high percentage standpoint, there's a few locations that we can eliminate. So there's no roads that go anywhere around this location. There's no reminiscence of roads that could have deteriorated over the past 30 years. Nothing really to speak of. I guess we can go back in time as far as it goes. It'll go back to 1985. We'll see how clear the picture is here. It's not that clear. Let's go one step forward. So 1991, here's a picture of the lake. Only a few years after Randy went missing. And we zoom in and we can see that some of this area is kind of cleared out. There's still heavy growth here, and no real roads that go down to the water anywhere around here. So it's safe to say from a high percentage standpoint that we can rule out a lot of this shoreline where something could have happened here. Now I've personally been to this lake before, and this is a huge hill with a ton of big trees on it. So this is kind of outside of what I would consider probable. So let's go back to a color modern day photo after we've kind of seen what the terrain looks like. So a few locations that kind of stick out to me is one, the dam. If something could have happened, it's not too far to go into the water. And if any of you have ever been to Leavenworth State Lake, this road right here is actually feels pretty treacherous and feels pretty close to the water. So to me, this is a super high percentage chance that something could have gone wrong here, and a car could be somewhere right in here. Same thing with up here. As close as this road is to the water, all of this stretch is something that is very, very, very worth making a few passes with modern day fishing electronics to see if we can find any cars at this lake. So I would say here and then here is something that really needs to be looked at. Now, honestly, this may seem like a huge area, but with modern day fishing electronics, this would not take a lot of time to graph. This would not take a lot of time to look at. So really we're looking at maybe an hour tops to go through this entire area and look and hit all of these high percentage areas. Now there are, if I'm going to spend time to go out here and look at these locations, it's probably worth checking maybe this fence row down around here just in case something could have happened there. That's not super high percentage of a chance, but there is a possibility that something could have happened there if for some reason got on this fence line and was driving down that way. But I would say that looking at Leavenworth State Lake here and all throughout this location is an area that I think deems searchable. This is something that is very much worth my time and whoever's time that wants to graph to look at. All right, looking at my approach from that standpoint of a high percentage chance area that there could potentially be an accident, I want to know your guys' thoughts. I want to know different locations that you think something could have potentially happened, that we could go out with modern day fishing electronics and look over these locations and look for a car. So I've set up an email address. The link is down below. What I want you guys to do is to go out on lakes around the Northeast Kansas area, or really if you've got a missing person in your state and you want to do something like this, feel free to send me those as well, of different locations that you believe there could have been an accident at. Another thing that we haven't talked about up until this point is a boat ramp. A boat ramp is a super easy area for something horrible or something like this to happen, where it's just a straight shot down into the water. There are cars found at the bottom, at the end of boat ramps all the time. It's a place that something could potentially go wrong very easily. And so yeah, if you start looking at some of these lakes and start circling some of these areas on your computer and then emailing them to me, I'll start compiling a list of maps and really take this huge chunk that we have, a huge chunk of lakes that we have in Northeast Kansas, and start condensing it down into really manageable sections, someplace that me or anyone else that wants to graph to go out and search these locations and really try to find either the Randy Leach case, help bring closure to the Randy Leach case, or help bring closure to a different case. So if you guys would want to help, that'd help me out great, and I'm sure anyone involved would be greatly appreciative, especially if it leads to the finding and resolving of this case. So thanks, subscribe for more stuff to come. We'll see you guys later.